What a lovely day! Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you'd like to join the community debate, then go to nathanoakley.com and join the Flat Earth Debate Forum. If you'd like to support this channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Most importantly though, if you would like to join this discussion right now, then simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the shape of the Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel. So please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. And one last time, if you are new to the channel or you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now we are currently joined by The Plain Truth, Sleeping Warrior, Rebel, Paul, Flatten Earth, Eric and Chocolate Saying. Good to have you all.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, hello, hello.
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 Yo.
We've got a reasonably full panel, a couple of gaps if people do want to join, but let's see if we can rattle our way through housekeeping. Has there been any signs of curvature? Earth curve?
No.
No.
Nope.
Okay. Any signs of axial rotation of the Earth-based variety? Does Earth spin?
No,
Any proof of that?
no, it's magic.
No.
I feel axial rotation when I drink.
Yeah, damn it. You're doing a ranty on us. I have to add of the Earth-based variety just for Rebel.
I'm just joking, guys.
No axial rotation of the Earth-based variety?
No.
Any scientific evidence of gravity?
Scientific evidence of what?
Gravity, Travis.
Nope.
No.
Any evidence of the distance to the sun?
Can we go back to the gravity question?
Any scientific evidence of gravity?
Anytime this term is used, I'm a little perplexed, to be honest with you. So I understand there's two ways to look at it from my perspective. One way is sort of colloquially speaking, a force that pulls you down to the ground. Another view from sort of a scientific point of view is the force of matter that attracts matter, right? So the latter, I disagree with completely. As I agree with you, there's no scientific evidence for this.
Hey, Stephen.
But as
Yo.
Hello.
Hey, what's up, Steven?
So when we're talking about gravity, we're talking about the notion of matter attracting matter. Is that correct?
It
Depends.
depends.
That was a 10, right?
The next question out of our lips is which gravity when someone says gravity? Einstein gravity or Newtonian Cavendish gravity? So it depends on what the person's currently asserting. Outdated Cavendish mass attracting mass or up-to-date current bullshit, which would be Einsteinian bending of space-time.
I think both of those kind of go into the basket of the latter kind of a comprehension of gravity I have, which is mass attracts mass.
Well, that would be Einstein. That would
fix
be
it now, right?
Well, no, hold on. That would be Cavendish Newtonian.
Right. How's it? Enlighten me, please. How's that different from Einsteinian?
So, in mathematical terms or in physical terms?
Both.
Okay. In physical terms, one is self-explanatory, mass attracting mass. The other would be the bending of said fabric of space-time, demonstrated to school children with a trampoline stretched out and the spheres of the planets dropped into it to bend physically the fabric, as they describe it, of space-time, this concept.
Right.
And in mathematical terms, one is length, breadth, depth, or 3 space, if you like. The other is 4 space, or pseudo-Riemannian 4 space, length, breadth, depth, and time. So they're completely different in terms of their mathematics, and they're entirely different in terms of their physicality and what they do. They couldn't be more different. The two gravities are totally different to each other.
Yeah, but fundamentally they are the same, right? In terms of it results in apparent attraction of mass to mass, right?
Here's how they try to fuse it together, though, right? So now they try to say that since the current science is the bending of space-time.
No, guys, I have to interrupt. I'm sorry. It's not the point of my question to go down the rabbit hole of how they differ. Is to say one understanding of, at least where I'm standing, is what is called gravity could be classified as one is Newtonian, another one is Einsteinian, but they both have the same apparent result of mass attracts mass. Mathematically it's done differently, but this is the apparent result, right?
Yes, that's what I was trying to get to. Now the basis is that the bending of space-time is what actually causes the mass attracting mass.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. You can come up with any bullshit to explain it, but what I'm trying to understand is, as far as we're concerned, such phenomenon is not observed. Period. Right?
Absolutely correct.
That's why
right.
we asked the question.
So now we're left with the former classification in my mind as to what so-called gravity is, and that is a something, force, whatever that is, that have us stuck to the ground, which is not the gravity from the other camp of explanation of Newtonian or Einsteinian. Something else has nothing to do with mass, attractive mass, space-time bullshit, right? Something else. Like in my mind, something else along with buoyancy, because in my mind, I cannot separate myself from understanding the buoyancy and some force sticking us to the ground, whether it's a momentum force or something else, I don't know.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but buoyancy is just part of their mathematics when describing relative density. So buoyancy is a, what's the word? It's redundant in terms of explaining what's actually occurring. Relative density. Right. And relative density, in my humble opinion, absolutely does explain why we aren't floating off into the sky.
Right. So, but in my mind, something still has to assign down, right?
No, down is a relative term. Assigning down is where you can attribute this force to it. You don't have to assign it.
Can I just ask, are you aware of how Einstein defines down in his construct, mathematical construct?
No.
He defines down as the direction in which time travels more slowly.
Okay.
In the context of up and down, what the hell does that mean from us when we say up or down if we're going to be citing gravity as a thing that we're going to try and prove with a mathematical construct, that down is not actually to the center of the earth, it's the direction in which time travels more slowly? Right. Do you see the paradox and the nonsense of this position at the minute?
Yeah. I think we're going the wrong direction here, guys. I'm not acting as a devil's advocate here for the gravity. I think you're getting me wrong here. I'm just trying to genuinely understand as to what you think for the lack of a better word, force that having us stuck to the ground actually is.
There is no force.
We know it's not a gravity from the point of understanding of Einsteinian view or Newtonian view.
There is no force holding us stuck down. Only relative density, because helium balloons aren't stuck down. And what's the explanation for that? They're less dense than the air. So we're more dense than the air. Relative density does explain this perfectly. There is no force holding us down.
I would agree on the point that there is no up and down, it is all relative, but I would say that the denser objects always move to the same direction relative to the less dense object. That means all have the same direction relative to each other. If you remove relative up and down.
Well,
Okay, so let's just visualize this. And
hang on, just before we visualize that, let me just challenge that last assertion by Zinder. You said that everything always seems to go in the same direction. That isn't true. Everything fills up everything laterally before it starts to move up and down. So, for example, you can't fill up a bucket of water using vertical strips of water that when you pour it in with your hose, the water will start to fill it up laterally first until it starts to push itself to the limits of the container, and then it'll start to move up and down. But it's not accurate to say that things always fall down. They don't. They fall laterally first unless they're in a state of disequilibrium.
Yeah, but that's not really what I said, is it?
No, but it addresses your point specifically. You said that everything always seems to fall in the same direction when it's more dense. That's not true. They fall laterally unless they're in a state of disequilibrium.
When
I'd like to also...
Go on, sorry.
But, so the way I understand density and relative density is a more denser material matter pushes less denser matter up, from my perspective.
Yeah,
right?
That's if you fix the... Sorry, I've just got to interrupt you again. So your last statement was from your perspective. So you're fixing a vector. You're assigning a starting point. So you're taking it from relative direction, which it absolutely is always, to being fixed at your position. Now, from that point on, that's where you need to start accounting for this force that's down, because you've assigned a starting position that's you.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I prefaced that with being relative to me.
But no. Relative to you is the starting point, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, direction is just relative until you start assigning starting positions and giving things vectors. But if you do that, and you've got one fixed starting point in reference to you, then you can arbitrarily assign a force to down.
Right, I understand. I understand your point. So let's maybe rephrase it slightly differently. And I don't want to have this a debate about this. I'm just trying to genuinely understand how you guys view this, and I'm having difficulties with this. So from my perspective, let's say not from perspective, but from my understanding, less dense objects or matter gets pushed by the more dense matter towards the less dense area. Does that make any sense?
Towards the point where they equilibrium.
Yeah.
Where they're equilibrium. You understand? Yeah. Like where they equilibrize? I forget. I don't know the word. What the hell is
equalize?
The word? Equalize.
Reach equilibrium.
Yeah. So in other words, the matter of certain density will always tend to be moving towards the same density as it is.
No, it'll tend to try to reach equilibrium with its surroundings.
Yeah, he's right. His point he just made was right. Nathan's wrongly corrected him there. You're right. It'll always try to move towards the medium it's in. It'll never move away from it.
Right. So it will try to move to the medium equal to that of its content. Let's put it that way. It's density.
Yeah, because everybody starts with the default position of air, and we always perceive things fall down generally. I know helium balloons do go up, but we perceive things fall down. But they ignore the fact that we're in air when we're doing this basis, when we're doing this like observation. Change the medium, and then it starts changing quickly.
Okay, so then can we then imagine a scale sort of where the zero is either the least dense area or the most dense area, depending how you want to look at it. Let's say it's a least dense area. 0 is no density, and the further away you go, positively or negatively from 0, becomes more dense. So let's say we're in the positive side of a scale, and we put an object there with a certain density that is not equal to the area we put it in. Let's say it is less dense than the area we're putting it in, and it's more of a density of 0, then that matter will move based on relative density argument, will move towards zero.
Yeah, but the problem is Newton's first law of motion requires that for any accelerating mass.
No, it won't. That entirely depends on the medium that it's in. So where's the scale being
I prefaced
placed?
that, Anthony.
Sure.
Sorry, Nathan.
Where's the scale starting? You said 0, right? So
0 being no density, yes.
Where in a geographical sense would that be?
No, I'm not talking about geographically. I'm just trying to imagine the play of forces of the phenomenon. I'm just visualizing what we're talking about. That's all I'm trying to do.
Sure, but where is it being visualized? What's the overriding medium that it starts in?
We can take any material. We can take air. We can take gas.
Okay, Nathan, allow me. Let me deal with this.
Hold on, Anthony. So you're saying this has to start in air or gas?
Both are the same, so it doesn't really matter.
Okay, so we're starting in gas on the ground.
No. You're talking about the medium.
Yeah, yeah.
So 0 would necessitate then having no medium at all, right? Let's imagine vacuum, or the least amount of particles we can actually attain. And then the further away you move from the 0 in either direction, the more dense the medium becomes.
Okay, so can we screen share, please, Nathan?
Yeah, sure.
So you might need to click the thumbnail inside the Hangout so you can see my screen. But we've got a density tower, a combination of solids and fluids. And you can see that there is a little cherry tomato pretty much in the middle. And it sits at the same layer as dish soap. So we know that the density of the cherry tomato is probably very close to the dish soap. What we can do is we can give the value of the dish soap the value of 0. And all the layers above it, we'll give them a value of 1 for each layer that goes above or below. And basically what we can do is manipulate the medium, and we can make that cherry tomato change its position just by adding a bit more or a bit less of different densities of fluids. Now, if we reduce the amount of disruption to a minimum and just did it with a syringe, you could get more milk in a syringe, put the syringe in, inject the milk into the syringe, and then that dish soap, the cherry tomato will not go into the milk. It'll stay in that layer that it's in. Equally, you could do it with water, and you could put more water in with a syringe, and that dish soap, that cherry tomato will not go into that water. It'll have to move. Now, so if we're going to use the dish soap as 0, the medium of 0, then you can see what's going to happen. You can call them unicorns. You don't have to call them meters per second squared or kilograms per cube or whatever. It doesn't matter what the units are. They're all relative. You can call them unicorn farts. As long as you've got a relative position, you understand what's always going to happen if you know the densities that are involved. Does that help?
No, I have no argument against that. I totally follow that, and I understand that.
Did that help though, or are you making a different point?
I was making a different point.
Sorry, carry on then.
No. So if we take this example, right, then in my interpretation, in my laying out of the sort of problem I'm trying to solve, 0 would be not where the tomato is, but imagine 0 being where tomato is, and in each direction, in terms of up and down from the picture we're looking at, the density will increase, not decrease. Because right now we have a linear scale, right? You have from at the bottom is the most dense, at the very top is the least dense.
Sure. You can put, as long as it's relative, you can put your 0 value anywhere.
No. So 0 value being the least dense, and in any direction from 0, the density will increase, right? Which is not represented by the example you are giving. So we're talking about slightly different. I'm trying to establish what, because in the example you're giving me, right, the most dense material is at the bottom, right, and it's not at the top. And I'm trying to figure out what dictates that. right? Because if you seal that container, right, so there's no outside pressure, there's no outside interaction with the outside world. So the container, as far as container is concerned, within the container, there's no interaction, there's no knowledge as to what up and down, there's no coordinate system at all, right? Because it doesn't interact with outside world.
So the answer to your question is one layer will not allow another layer that is greater density or less density than it. It will not allow it to take the space that it's in because of its own density.
I'm not arguing that point, Anthony.
You're asking what makes the order. The answer is density itself.
No,
density.
No, I'm not asking that. I understand what makes the order. I'm just trying to understand the direction of the order. Okay, understand?
It's
so if
relative.
you take that container,
Sorry,
and
I've
you
said this
flip
3
it upside
times.
down.
I'm starting to get a little bit, frustrated with you, Rebel. 3 times I've said that it's relative, and it's only at the point that you arbitrarily assign a starting point that you need to worry about what up and down are, because they are relative to your starting point that you have then fixed.
I understand.
I hadn't quite finished. My bad.
So I agree with you. So
I hadn't quite finished. So
Okay.
as Anthony's just explained to you, the only thing that makes any difference is, as stated at the beginning, the relative density. That's it.
Okay, so what happens if I turn that container upside down?
It'll just order itself based on its relative density.
But the bottom basically will be at the top now, relatively speaking, and then we'll start to move down again, right?
Yeah,
It will
all
order
liquids
itself
in
based on
that
relative
body
density.
will displace.
Yeah,
What it'll do is it'll displace
I
every.
don't think we may be speaking about the same issue here.
We
So
are.
the fact that
Rebel,
Okay.
we understand what you're saying. The top will become the bottom will become the top. But the problem is they're all in a state of disequilibrium to themselves at that point. They're not balanced. So they have to form. And the reason why they have to form is because of their own density.
So what will happen is the heaviest or denser matter will move
Displace the
towards
mediums above it.
will move towards
Will
I'm sorry, go ahead.
displace the mediums less dense than it.
Yeah, but what
Right.
dictates the direction? You see what I'm saying? Because if you turn
not
that,
a
let's say you
how many
fill
times?
it-
Why are we going around it? Why are you circle jerking us? I don't understand
I'm
what's
not
going on
circle
here.
jerking you.
I think I know what he's
hold
asking.
on. It
I know
seems
what he's
that
asking.
way. You just asked a question that you keep answering within your own assertions. So the direction is relative. So for example, do you want to prop it back up, Anthony? For example, one thing when you force it into disequilibrium may go from your relative position down, but there's things rushing past it up. So what is down to one element in that container is totally irrelevant to another, because they're all moving in different directions relative to each other. And it's only at the point that you say, I'm now the cherry tomato, you can say what's going up relative to your position and what's going down relative to your position, because direction is relative.
Okay, now I follow you. I'm not disputing that point at all, and I'm not trying to make an argument here, guys.
I think I understand what
what
he's
it is
saying.
is
Let's stay
that
calm here.
maybe
So
I
the
know what he's
direction relative, right? The displacement that occurs, the disbalance, is dictated by something. In my view, right?
Yes.
If you have this
Yes,
container,
yes, we've said this too. It's starting to get very annoying. It's relative to its density.
I think I know what he's asking, if anybody can hear me.
Okay, maybe somebody wants to rephrase
He
what
keeps
I'm
asking the
asking.
same question.
Yeah,
Correct me if I'm wrong. You're asking what causes the down bit, correct?
No.
I know what he's asking. If you'll let me jump
Go
in,
ahead.
I think could be wrong.
please, Paul. 'Cause
I know.
don't get it.
I think I think I get what Nathan's saying is my perception of up and down is relative. I could be on my side, and technically the movement will be left or right depending on my position and all that stuff. That's what Nathan's saying. I mean, what I'm hearing and what I kind of understand what he's trying to say is, why are things in the density, buoyancy and density, relative to the ground? Like, why does it want to go under our, if I'm standing up and my feet are on the ground, why do things order themselves in that direction? Don't
They
order
don't.
themselves right to left? Or
They don't. So if the ground is 0, let's pretend 0 is, let's see, sea level. What do you think's going to happen if you go into the sea? Will the same things happen? Or will it completely alter based on the fact that you're no longer standing on solid ground, and what goes lower, down, is a completely different medium? So to get lower than the current solid ground we stand on, we have to enter a different medium, and the physics and the relative density completely change.
I got a question. So if you take
hold
a
on,
barrier,
nobody's acknowledged that point. Nobody. We're just going to move past that, are we?
No, I acknowledge that point. I think that I was just trying to rephrase what I thought he was saying. If I misrepresented it, please let me know.
To me, I hear the same question that Nathan asks. Why is down? Maybe that's just my misunderstanding, but that's what I hear Rebel saying, because it sounds like he understands the density, the relative density point, but then he's asking further, like, why is this like that? And it's like, dude, I don't know. We don't really know. It's just, this is the way it is.
Well, it is only like that, dependent on what density you are, relative to the state you're in. So when you say, well, why does it always go down? Well, no, for the cherry tomato, it doesn't. So it isn't down anymore, right? Oh, well, no, it is still down, but only if it's relative to me and I assign it a starting point. But if I assign myself a different density and pretend I'm suddenly vegetable oil instead of a cherry tomato, different things occur once I'm pushed into disequilibrium. I might go up. Oh, well, up isn't up anymore because it's just relative to whatever state that material is in. It's only up when you assign a starting point.
So if you would take a barrier and divide every relative density medium here on Anthony's example, so that every medium gets divided by a barrier, and then you turn it around, right? And then you let it settle, and then you remove the barrier. Now it is in an equilibrium, yet the relative density is the same, isn't it?
So what you're saying is you put a
slider. How would the relative density be the same, though?
It is because it is still in the same container, and the medium is still relative to each other, has still the same density. And now it starts to mix when you remove the barrier. Once you turn it around and let it settle down, the medium starts to mix together until the most dense thing is at the bottom, and the let's say 0 value is in the middle, and then you go to plus with the ping pong ball.
But look at the way these things are layered out. What makes you think they need a barrier between them to do that? There's no barrier in between these things.
No, I introduce a barrier because when you turn it around, then it starts mixing together, right? So when you put a barrier in, when you put a barrier between those mediums and turn it around, the medium still stays the same until you remove the barrier. When all the energy is gone of the turning around, you remove the barrier, and then they start to mix together again. Until the most dense thing is at the bottom and the least dense thing is at the top relative to the ground, obviously. Is
that the end of your example?
Yeah, just saying that.
Okay, I don't need to reiterate it. I just didn't want to interrupt. So you're saying once you've turned it up and down with sliders in between all these different states, you think that the energy is dissipated? Or do you think you've still left some potential energy there on top of the slider? So for example, Zinder, if you slide a little slider on top of the bolt, yeah, and then you turn it upside down, obviously the bolt will still sit on the slider, but it's still got potential energy because it's not got the resistance that's not suddenly there from the less dense material below it with a slider separating it. That material beneath it is still less dense. It's just being held back by something more dense, a slider.
Yeah, so that's why I think that I need a downward acceleration in order for potential energy to exist, but that's my perception of the world.
Why, when it was you that turned it upside down, Zinder? Suddenly you've turned it upside down, put a load of potential energy in, and then said that you need an explanation for why there's potential energy there. Oh, well, let me enlighten you, Zinder. You and your hand and your sliders installed all of that energy when you turned it around.
Also, you keep it there, right? Like a battery that will never exhaust.
What, it's always got potential
Until
energy? Yeah, it's always got potential energy. So if you've got a rock sat happily on a beach, yeah, it's not going to sink, is it? It's got the same potential energy. But yeah, if you roll it into the ocean, it would sink, going down. It always had the same potential energy. It just needed somebody to come along and roll it into the ocean, or turn the petri dish upside down. But that would be you, wouldn't it? Had you not done anything, it would have stayed happily in equilibrium. But you came along, did something, and then said, suddenly there's something happening. We must give this a downward force.
Yeah,
so
sure.
if you move it ever so slowly, will the separation of elements remain as is?
Things generally stay in equilibrium unless they're acted upon by a force.
Okay, I'm sorry, I had to drop out for a second there. Maybe I missed some of the points that Zinder made or somebody else made. I don't know. But I was just returning to the example the picture Anthony put on the screen in terms of separation of elements within the cylinder, which I don't know. I don't know about you, but I haven't disputed that at all. My struggling to understand is if you have it sit and have it settled, then you slowly turn it 180 degrees. What tells the element, the heaviest element, now to occupy position of the least heavy element? What tells it them to do that?
The same thing that told them to form that way in the first place, their density.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the density would have to be relative to something. If the container is sealed, it has no awareness of the outside pressure, densities, and whatnot. Isn't that true?
Yeah, and it would remain that way until someone comes along and really slowly turns it upside down. You seem to be trying to attribute a force to an effect that, even if you describe it as happening really slowly, is still just you doing it, isn't it?
So, Nathan, you're saying if I disturb the container, the heaviest element that was at the bottom of the container will now be at the top, and it will make itself way down to the bottom of the container again.
Yeah, what do you think the cause of that would be, though? Do you think it's because of a downward acceleration force that you magically make up? Or is it because you have done that? Which do you think's more likely? If you put it into a logical syllogism, it would include you doing something, wouldn't it? It would include you actually physically intervening. As I said earlier, unless acted upon by a force, it's going to just stay in equilibrium. It's going to be a happy cherry tomato doing nothing, just staying there.
I agree and I disagree at the same time. I think there's a critical component of this solution is missing.
Let me
if
ask
the container has no...
Let me ask the question if you clarify. Oh, it's okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to act on that cylinder right now in the world. If I turn that cylinder where it's laying horizontal to me, what will happen to the liquids inside the cylinder?
You're posing a question to me?
I'm posing it to anybody because I think I'm trying to get to what you're trying to ask.
Right. Your question is, if it's turned on its side, what will happen? It will reach exactly the same state, but in a more horizontal fashion instead of a more vertical fashion. So you'll have thinner lines running horizontally in exactly the same way, just in a different shape because it's on its side. But ultimately speaking, everything would order itself in exactly the same fashion as it is now.
Right.
Right. Now, I think he's asking, why does it do that?
Because of the density, the relative density of each material.
Yeah, but why didn't they stop within their original position?
Oh, because somebody moved it. I thought I just explained this 2 minutes ago. Did I not make myself clear? Unless acted upon by a force, things will stay in equilibrium. Happy tomato until you move it.
Right. So you're saying the kinetic energy would be enough for them to rearrange themselves to their original position?
No, their relative density, not the energy you've put in. They will reach an equilibrium always because of their relative densities.
No, I understand that. I don't argue that. They will reach the equilibrium according to relative density.
Can I ask you just a quick question? Is the next thing you're going to be asking about what happens after you've done something to it?
Yeah.
So I'll answer it before you ask it. You are about to do something to it. So I'm pretty damn certain that the effect will be as a result, the cause of that effect that you're about to ask why, is going to be because you did something to it. Cause and effect. Unless you do something to it, it'll stay exactly as it is. So every time you do something to it and ask why something's happening, it's because you're doing something to it.
Okay. Let's maybe look at the problem the other way around. If I have the same cylinder with all the elements described before, and I shake it violently for, let's say, a couple of hours till all the elements are thoroughly mixed in together, right? And I'll leave it standing. I'm trying to understand what makes the heavier element appear at the bottom of the cylinder relative to my position.
You've answered your own question.
The ground.
The relative density of each mass, each individual layer is more or less dense than the one that comes before or after it.
Which makes them separate.
Yes.
But that doesn't answer the question in my mind as to why the heavier element
let me just confirm your question.
Always.
Let me just reiterate your question. If you come along and you shake up these materials previously in perfect equilibrium, then you're asking why something happens after you shake it violently. Is that what your question is? I'll answer again. No. This is the second time. You have shook it violently.
That's not the question, Nathan. Why the most dense element always remains at the bottom is my question.
Because it's more dense than the one above it.
Because it's the most dense, man.
Yeah. Why didn't it go up?
Because you shook it doesn't change the density of it.
No, I understand. I'm not saying that. I feel like we're speaking different languages.
I think he's talking about what's causing it, and I think this is just simply a law. It's just the way it is, and I think that's what Nathan's getting at. It's just the way it is.
It's just more dense. It's going to go to the bottom. When you take this jar and you flip it over, the layer that's on the bottom obviously is the most dense. Now that will be at the top.
From what I'm hearing Nathan saying, and I totally agree that equilibrium will be found between the different density of elements. I've never disputed this. It was always given to me. I understand that.
Can we change it another way? Let's look at it from a different perspective. Let's look at it from temperature. We can agree that hot always goes to cold every time. Agreed?
Yeah.
For you to ask why is the thing at the bottom always at the bottom is the same as asking why is cold always cold? What makes it cold?
Yeah, but the cold and the hot doesn't attribute direction, right?
No, you do. Direction would be relative until you assign a starting point. This is where we began.
I see. So okay, so relative direction would be assigned. I agree.
Well, at that point, that's when you get your up and down, though, isn't it? At that moment.
I'm having difficulties translating that to elements separating.
Right, let's do it to the temperature. Why does hot always goes to cold?
Does it? Does it?
Yes.
You can put it the other way around, and you can say, "Oh, it's relative."
No, let's not derail the conversation. It's not relative. Anthony's question is pretty straightforward. Excuse me. Let's not derail the conversation here.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, I forgot what you were saying. So why
when you're asking why is the densest layer always at the bottom, I could equally say, why is the coldest temperature always the opposite of hot?
Right.
The
And
law
is the
of
answer,
thermodynamics.
isn't the answer to that, that's just the way it is? It's a law of nature. That's why it's a law.
And I'm perfectly comfortable with this.
But why is it different for the density?
You're kind of not
layers?
comfortable, though. You've been asking numerous times, and we've told you the same answer again, and that's kind of what it comes down to.
No, there is a detail embedded in my questioning that I'm trying to clear out. So, Anthony, to your point, because one element, let's say I'm talking about temperature, moves towards another, right? A state of matter moves towards the other state, right? And the direction is relative. In my mind, then, right? No matter how you turn that cylinder around, the heavier element will always stick to one side of the element, whether it's going to be the top relative to you or the bottom relative to you. They will all separate each other nicely if we're following that logic. And it would not be any difference whether you're holding it upright, downright, sideways. So the law is still preserved in terms of thermodynamics and law of entropy. What I'm trying to understand, what makes the heavier, denser element stick to a specific side of a cylinder, right, relative to the ground, is what I'm struggling to understand. If we're saying this is just a law,
it's the same thing that makes hot go to cold and pressure go to vacuum.
So hot to cold relative to the ground is irrelevant, right? Because the direction could be anything, right? But that's not the case when we're talking about density. Density has a very specific preference.
I just need to ask you a quick question. When you say the ground, do you mean maybe the ground at the bottom of the ocean?
Any ground.
Oh, really? Because the effects would be completely different. What was formerly up for one of those densities would change if the ground that you started on had ocean above it. In other words, it's relative to the medium.
Okay, I may not be aware of what you're talking about. So you're saying if I submerge that cylinder in the water, the position of elements will change?
Yeah, it's relative density.
Okay, well, that's the probably key of the matter that I'm not aware of. I'm not aware of having... I'm sorry.
It's the word relative that we're struggling with. We're getting the density bit and we're contrasting that perfectly with the other densities, but it's the word relative that we're not getting. It's relative to each other. It's not relative to a direction. It's all relative to each other every time.
Precisely. So when you attribute relative to you or relative to the ground, then we have to know what terms we are talking about. What is the starting point you describe? Because if the medium above that ground is different, the behavior for each material will be different. In other words,
even though they're isolated within the cylinder?
Oh, sorry. So what we're saying is I'm going to put it underwater inside a cylinder now. So the medium of the water makes fuck all difference now. That would be slightly benign. Why would you suggest such a thing?
Well, that's what I was getting at, though.
What? So we're going to put it underwater, but keep it in the cylinder. So essentially, the relative densities to each other remain the same inside the cylinder. So we could put it in the fantasy vacuum of unicorn farts, and the same thing would bloody happen if it's sealed inside the cylinder. My point being that you said relative to the ground, whereas if the ground itself, with that cylinder's open, isn't it, Anthony? Yeah, we could use that cylinder. My bad. I'll take it all back. Yeah, we put that cylinder underwater, and what was formerly up for the milk suddenly isn't up anymore. It changes because of the medium that it's in.
For the open or closed cylinder, I'm sorry.
Oh, are we going to close this cylinder now? It seems like you have a motive. You're talking over me. My bad. It seems like you have a motivation here. Why would that be?
No, I'm not.
I just wonder.
No.
You spent quite a considerable amount of the last show pointing out how I should be a bit more tame, let people get to the end of their arguments, and then we seem to be going round in circles. And now we're at the point that I've made it absolutely clear to both you and the audience about the relative density changing relative to the ground that you assigned, but put the ground at the bottom of the ocean. Everything gets changed, and now you want to seal up this container that we've all looked at for quite a period of time without a top on it, and now you want to seal it. I want to know why you want to do that. What's your motivation in being here?
Go ahead.
What's your
The container
motivation?
was sealed.
What's your motivation in
all
being
along.
here? What's your motivation? Why are you here?
Why am I here?
Yes, why are you here?
I'm here just to have a conversation with you guys.
Well, you seem to get the answer to a question and then ask the same question over and over again. When I
No,
get
so anytime I'm hearing the shows and the question of gravity comes up, I hear how the other side struggles with it. And I
really?
myself struggle with the notion of,
the other
as
side.
I said before, we're talking about gravity.
Sorry, what's
right?
this other side? We weren't talking about sides. You and I are having a conversation here. Why is this other
Right.
side come into this? I don't understand. You and us, I don't even know what side of the fence you sit on. So I will now arbitrarily decide that given you've declared the other side struggles to understand this, that you're a bloody Poe.
Bloody what?
Poe.
What is that supposed to mean? Like, this conversation is getting derailed. This
it
is
really?
not
Yeah,
my
but-
intention.
Hold on,
at all.
hold on. This conversation's getting derailed. A moment ago, I made it really clear that if we put that cylinder on the ground, as detailed by you, that what was up for certain densities of the material would then become down, based on your assignment of a position. Yeah? Is that unclear? Because the reason I ask is you now want to seal up the container, which would essentially completely negate my point, wouldn't it?
Well, maybe we were talking about different containers all along.
No, we're not. I've just detailed back to you what you wanted to do. I will say it again, because again, I'm now questioning your motives
Anthony,
here.
you're
I'm
thinking that
talking.
I'm arguing with you.
I'm
I'm not.
talking.
I'm
I
trying
have
to get
listened
to
to
the
your
to the
shit
understanding of
long enough. Now you listen to me. And for all those people who are in the audience who, like you on the last show, feel that I don't let people get to the end of their point, I have listened to you long enough. Now you will listen to me. My question is a sideline to your point. The point being that the relative density changes depending on the medium. My point being made twice, that if you put it on the floor, on the ground, and the medium above said ground is water, all of the relative directions of the materials will change. Now, to combat that, not acknowledge it and recognise that that's an exceptional way of explaining this point, you then decided that to negate that point, to make that point invalid, you would seal the container. Now I want to know why you did that.
Can I answer you? My assumption was we were talking about sealed container all along. Maybe that's where disconnect was.
Okay.
So I wasn't attempting to seal the open container.
No problem.
We were
Just bear
turning
with me a
container-
second. Just bear with me. Anthony, can you bring the diagram back up? It was on screen for quite a considerable amount of time, enough for me to, from memory, declare that it was in fact open, because there was a ball at the top of it. Do you have that to hand, Anthony? No, he's on mute and vanished. Just at the crucial moment.
Because we were like turning this container up and down, and the assumption was always the container is sealed. At least from my perspective.
Sorry, from your perspective, it looks open. From my perspective,
Okay, well, that's when we disconnect.
we
Maybe
disconnect.
we should go back to...
What do you mean we disconnect? What does that
you
mean?
you
What
were
what
talking
does that
about
mean?
open container,
I mean,
and
I don't
would
understand
assume
what that
the closed
means.
container at all times.
It seems open and very clearly and obviously open. You, on the other hand, very specifically detailed it being sealed, as in a
Yeah.
seal don't talk over me, my friend. I didn't talk over you once, did I? Do you recall
I'm
a
not
single?
talking, I'm
Do
just
you
acknowledging.
recall a single occasion where I talked over you during your entire amble that's been about an hour long, with you telling us how we should all be considerate of the opposition, that you're not apparently, and we should listen to their points in full and not degrade them, all this crap. Now we're at the point where we're talking about something very specific, the general nature of how we exist in our relative states of density. And we've got this picture on screen, clearly an open container. And I've made an example that you have bypassed by, and I quote, sealing this container. You said it would have to be sealed, as in closed up, formerly open, then closed. The word you used was sealed, was it not? Yes, it was. I don't even have to go back, my memory's not that bad. So your words betray you because you said, what if the container was sealed? So you're not being truthful when you say that you thought it was sealed all along, because if it was, you wouldn't need to declare about it being sealed, future tense. So I'm going to call you on you claiming you thought it was sealed up already, because it clearly isn't, and you had to detail it actually being sealed. So we're back to the original question. What is your motivation?
Well, can I address what you said before? So the reason I mentioned sealed, because I think I started realizing that we're talking about two different containers. And yes, you're right. If it's not sealed, I follow totally the logic of separating elements in the different mediums that will behave differently. And that's why I point out, because I realized there was probably a disconnect as we're talking about two different systems. And that's why I point out that the container sealed in terms of the model I was looking at.
Really?
So I'm not disputing your points in terms of open container.
That's interesting. So what about the layer that's already there called water?
You mean within the container?
Yeah.
So what about it?
We've already got the element I'm describing in this container, haven't we?
Yeah, but you were saying if you submerge the container underwater, meaning towards the ground, but underwater, you change the medium. I realized we are talking probably about two different systems. That's why I ask you.
Now I'm making a correction, because unbeknownst to me, water's already in this container, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it'd be absolutely no different.
I think so.
So it'd be no different. So the example doesn't actually change because there's already water there. The example remains exactly the same. Fortunately, unbeknownst to me, water's already one of the constituent parts. So the relative density, regardless, would remain exactly the same as it is now.
Right, which completely, I missed the point of submerging the cylinder in the water in this case.
Well, I didn't realize water was one of the constituent parts. So my correction. The example now has water in it. So you've got water as one of the constituent parts. In other words, if this was submerged in the ocean, all of the stuff below the water would drop and all of the stuff above the water would rise.
You meaning they will change directions?
Well, one will drop, one will go up.
So if we're talking about density, if previously you're submerging the cylinder, sealed cylinder.
No, not sealed. That's something you added.
Okay. So it's not sealed?
No.
Okay.
Well,
so if it's not sealed...
No, it's not. Look, it isn't.
Okay. All right, so if we're talking about open cylinder, I mean, we're obviously interacting with the outer density of air and whatever the system we put the cylinder in. So we'll obviously interact with it, no matter how we turn it around, right? If we turn it around, it will just spill out. My idea was always the cylinder was sealed with all the elements. And I was trying to understand why turning it around.
Well, Rebel, you're saying something very basic though. If you obviously if you turn this cylinder around and it's open, obviously everything's going to spill out.
Yeah.
So turning it around would only work if you seal it. But
Yeah.
the whole time we haven't really been talking about a sealed container, because this container is not sealed.
Right. Well, I'm sorry, I missed that point because we were twisting it around back and forth, and even Nathan said, somebody posed the question if you put the cylinder horizontally, and I think Nathan was the one who said they will arrange to the accordion layer, which I agree with. So in my mind, the container was always sealed. But if that's the problem, then sort of my question kind of loses its point.
Well, no,
if the container is open, then
no.
The thing you're missing is
it makes no difference. It now makes no difference because water's one of the constituent parts within the container to begin with.
Yeah. So if we go back to my original question, and I'm posing this question only for myself to understand what you think is a cause. Besides the point that Anthony made is just a law. I'm just trying to understand. That means that necessitates then there is a direction, meaning towards the ground, for the heavier element to be below relative to the ground, that of less denser element, right? No matter how you turn the container around, no matter what the medium container is in, sealed container, sealed.
Well, no, because if you're maple syrup, you don't go towards the ground. You go up. You go the opposite direction relative to it. So as far as that cherry tomato is concerned, the dish soap is the ground.
Yeah, but why is it the ground? Why it is not above?
So, excellent concession, finally. So you would concede that to the cherry tomato, right, it stops, it's zero, is the dish soap.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I've never argued that point.
Well, earlier you focused only on the bolt and said, well, it always goes towards the bottom. Well, let's focus on something different and say, what about the water?
Sure.
Well, relative to the water, the bolt always goes down. Well, not so if you're soda or you're rubbing alcohol. Just depends where you start. This is where we started the conversation. It depends on what you are in the beginning. If you're a cherry tomato, you've got stuff rushing past you, seemingly upwards. But relative to the thing that's below it, it's going downwards.
Right. So you're talking about when the elements are settled already, right?
No. No. We've shook it up. It's sealed.
Okay.
And they're all going in different directions. Well, for one thing, It's got stuff rushing past it downwards. But in reality, it's actually going upwards. It just depends on where you fix your starting point to say what that's actually doing as it reaches equilibrium, having had itself shook up.
Right. So what makes the heavier or denser element appear at the bottom of the container relative to the ground?
You focusing on it being the densest thing. So had you have said, why does the cherry tomato not always go down? Then we'd be having a different question, wouldn't we? But you're focusing on the most dense element and attributing it to down because it becomes your starting point. Well, why is it that the rubbing alcohol is always up? Let's decide that that is the arbitrary force of everything. The up that the rubbing alcohol experiences. How about that? Okay. Why is it that it always goes up? Let's focus solely on the ping pong ball. Why does it always go up? We must have a force of up, mustn't we? Because no matter how much you shake it, the ping pong ball always goes up, doesn't it? So why do we have this up? Oh, well, no, but it's not if you're a bolt. Oh, no, but let's not worry about the relative density of each thing we start at. Let's just focus on the bolt. Because that always goes, in quotes, down.
And we can focus on whatever it is. I think the
ping pong ball. Let's talk about that. From now on, let's always focus on the ping pong ball and see if we can get down out of it every time we shake it up. What do you think? Do you think we'll always get the ping pong ball to go down?
No, it will always stay on top.
Oh, so the opposite. So, Why is it different to the bolt? It must be because there's an arbitrary force of up, surely. There must be up, right? Must be this force forcing the ping pong ball up. Always goes up. So there must be a force of up. Correct?
I think I know what he's wrestling with. I think I know what
No,
Rebel's
hold on,
wrestling with.
hold on. So the ball will stay up because the denser materials will go below.
So why is it you understand it with the ping pong ball but not the bolt?
I'm trying to understand what makes the denser material goes down. And
Yeah,
what
you
makes
always
the ball
want to go
up.
onto the down. Forget the down bit. We're now worried about the opposite of that. Even though these will reach, what's that word? Equilibrium. We're not going to worry about that bit, the equilibrium, where it is now. What we're going to do, like you want desperately, is to seal up this container and shake it violently. But every time we do it, we seem to experience up. Every time. The lamp oil and the ping pong ball, they're always going up. So there must be a force of up, mustn't there?
No, by necessity of argument, yes.
Oh, but what about the stuff going down that causes equilibrium? Do you think they're perhaps balanced? Based on, perhaps, just guessing, but based on their relative density? And there's no force of up or force of down. It's just relative direction depending on your starting point and relative density depending on what you are in this petri dish.
Right.
So, in summary, once you assign a starting position, you can start worrying about what's up or down from that starting position. Different depending on where you start. So it's only the attribution of a starting point that gets you concerned about what down suddenly must be all the time. But conversely, I can do the equal and opposite with up.
Right, and I don't necessarily disagree with it.
So the two are in perfect balance, equilibrium. No up force, no down force.
Right.
I think, Rebel, I think I know what you're wrestling.
Rebel, is the problem, is it that you're having trouble letting go of the force? Is that what it is? Do you feel like there should be a force making these things move the way they are?
Fortunately, that is going to be my opportunity to say farewell to the live audience. So a massive, huge, enormous thank you to all of you who have tuned in on Nathan Oakley channel to this live broadcast. Massive thank you for liking, commenting, sharing and subscribing. If you'd like something to do after this show has ended, then go to nathanoakley.com and join the Flat Earth Debate Forum to keep up to date with the community Flat Earth Debate. I've been Nathan Oakley and I'll see you all in the next video.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!